Today I'm going to be sharing an interview that I did with Eric Lundgren. If you would like to skip me talking and rambling, click below. There's going to be a timestamp in the video description that says exactly where the interview starts. If you click there, you will get directly to the interview without any of my backstory, explaining, or talking about my opinion of what went on. Eric Lundgren is the individual that's going to be spending 15 months in federal prison for releasing and selling counterfeit copies of Windows Restore CDs. These Windows Restore CDs were the CDs that you can download with a tool and create for free. They only work if you already have a license to Windows. I very much so objected to the fact that Microsoft testified in court that a CD with a license key that they were selling for $25 is of equal value to the CDs that Eric was selling, which do not include a license key. I believe that was wrong, and I believe that his 15-month sentence predicated on that incorrect statement is wrong. I still believe that to be true now. However, there was a lot of information left out of my initial video, and for that, I apologize. Truthfully, I'm going to get things wrong sometimes, and I did get things wrong in that original video. What I got wrong there was that I did not give you all of the information, and I'm going to give you all the information in this video. Some of you have said, how can I trust everything you've said before if you were able to get this wrong? Well, when I get something wrong, I will follow up as quickly as I can with as much information as I can and as much transparency as I can. I'm not going to let something that I know to genuinely be terribly wrong just stay out there and not comment on it. And secondly, I appreciate that people like you hold my feet to the fire and ensure that if I say something that you believe is wrong, that you look it up. I don't want you to blindly listen to and believe everything I say. I want you to listen to what I say, then think about it. Then do a little bit of your own research, then come to your own conclusion. I do not want fans. I don't want people that just blindly adore everything that I have to say. I appreciate that you challenge me, and I appreciate that you challenged me here. Now, what he did that I didn't put enough emphasis on in that video is that he made these discs look identical to the discs that come from Dell or Microsoft. And these discs were attempted to be sold to individuals who rejected them because they noticed that they were counterfeit. The individuals that he tried to sell these discs to, who realized that they were counterfeit, were individuals that thought that they were getting original discs from Dell or Microsoft. These discs contain the exact same software on it, bit-for-bit copy. However, the label on them and all the effort that was put into making a CD that looked exactly like the CD that came from Dell or Microsoft is wrong. For that reason, I cannot support this as a right to repair issue. I disavow the right to repair hashtag in any way, shape, or form being used with this issue. I understand that what Microsoft did was wrong. They got him put in prison for 15 months based on false information. However, the fact that he did this, that Microsoft did something wrong, does not negate what Eric did wrong, and he did considerable wrong here. You could have distributed this disk to allow people to reinstall Windows on their computers without ever having to use the original logos and the original design. This disk was copied to the point where the specific physical attributes to these disks were the exact same as the physical attributes of the Microsoft Dell disks that they were distributing, to the point where virtually nobody would be able to tell the difference. That's not necessary if your only goal is to help people reinstall Windows in their computers. You could simply put Microsoft Windows refurbished computer reinstall disk and Courier New or Comic Sans font on the disk and be done with it. You didn't have to represent it as something that came from Dell or Microsoft. Because it was misrepresented as something that directly came from Dell or Microsoft, he screwed himself. What we are doing with Right to Repair, I want to be able to have someone like that individual from the Norway iPhone repair shop. I want someone like him to be able to send his screens that he gained via voluntary transactions to China, have them refurbished in China, and then be able to re-import them into his country and sell them as refurbished. Right now, he was sued for trying to do that because the screens had a crossed-out Apple logo on them. He was not trying to sell these repaired screens as new or screens from Apple. He was going to sell them as refurbished screens to his customers, and he was never going to represent them as an Apple product. But just because he was importing them, he was getting in trouble. These are the types of issues that Right to Repair stands for. I want to be able to import new hard drive cables when your A1278 MacBook has an issue with the hard drive cable. I want to be able to get new screens for devices. I want to be able to replace your keyboard when you spill liquid on it, and Apple doesn't want to help you with that. And I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to misrepresent what it is that I'm selling. I'm not putting logos on things that didn't have logos on things. If something has a logo and it was made if I'm buying some used or off-lease keyboard or trackpad from China, then it is what and it has a logo, it is what it is. But if it doesn't have a logo, I'm not printing one on there so that I can fraudulently state that something came from Apple when it didn't. Right to repair is not about masquerading a counterfeit as an original, nor is it about printing up our own parts with Apple logos. If we were to print up our own parts in any way, shape, or form, we're not going to include another company's logos on them. This is very different from what Eric did. What Eric did makes us all look bad in some way because it makes us look like criminals, and it justifies the very laws that don't allow us to import power buttons and volume buttons and gets us in trouble for importing screens or charging ports or anything else that we want to import. I believe every rule that exists because somebody did something stupid and ruined it for everybody else. The reason that a lot of workplaces have a time clock is not because when that place had one employee, they wanted a time clock. Nobody wanted to set up a time clock or buy a time clock. They got the little punch clock so that we would have to punch in because when the company grew, people showed up late, and they had to start keeping track of who showed up late or who didn't show up when they were supposed to show up and expected to get paid for it anyway. It sucks when you have to put rules into place, but rules are put in place because the lowest common denominator did something wrong. And when we have to fight for the ability to import trackpads, keyboards, hard drive cables, power buttons, screens, basic stuff that half the time Apple's not willing to allow you to fix, even if you're willing to pay them money. The reason we have to fight for that ability, the reason we have customs in the way, the reason stuff like Jess's shipment of $1,700 worth of iPhone screens was confiscated by customs when it had no Apple logos on it, is because of rules like this. And these rules exist because people like Eric do this. And companies like Microsoft and Apple can justify these rules existing and justify the thugs at ICE going around and ripping apart people's boxes and throwing their batteries and power buttons and screens away. Even when there's no Apple logos on them, this is all justified in the name of avoiding counterfeiting. And who's doing the counterfeiting? Well, Eric's doing the counterfeiting. Eric did not need to have those logos there. But when he chose to put that identical copy of the CD there so it looked exactly the same as if it came from Dell or Microsoft, he was counterfeiting. And because he did that, now there are people at the border that go through people who are innocent, like Jessa Jones, who's simply importing iPhone screens to fix people's iPhones in her neighborhood that have no Apple logos on them, that are aftermarket. Her box is gone through, her box is looked through, her box is seized and tossed away, even though there's no Apple logos on it, because somebody else did something wrong. And because somebody else did something wrong, innocent people have to suffer. That really sucks. For that reason, I cannot support what he did. I don't think that he should be going to prison for it, but there's no way in hell that I'm advocating right to repair hashtags being used here. What he did is what the laws that hurt us are. These laws exist because of these types of actions, and there's no reason for them. You do not need to put the logo and the exact printing of another company's product on your product in order to allow them to reinstall Windows. All that does is muddle the water for all of us who genuinely want to provide service to our clients with parts without misrepresenting where our parts came from. And even if Eric did want to help repair things, him being involved in this specific movement is actually going to be damaging to it. So I need to draw the border there and say that what was going on in Norway with the iPhone screens, I fully support, I advocate in favor of that, and I support that. What happened with Eric, I do not believe that he should be going to prison for 15 months. I believe what Microsoft did was wrong, but what he did was wrong as well. And it was wrong enough that I cannot support it and not support it as part of Right to Repair in any way, shape, or form. I apologize if my initial video made it sound like I was supporting it, or if I was supporting it, that's done with. That being said, it does not add up to me after this interview that what he was doing was being done for maximum profit. When you look at the amount of employees that he has, and you look at the amount of money that there was to be made over doing this deal, and you look at his overhead expenses, it does not add up. As a business owner, this was something that was very skeptical to me when I was reading through the emails. The emails make it sound like he's doing this and rubbing his hands together about all the money that he's going to make. If you read the language in the emails, it sounds like the language of a scammer. It sounds like the language of somebody that's looking to get one over and is so excited that he's getting one over and making some money. But it didn't make sense to me. Why is somebody with 20 to 80 employees, who is already a millionaire with all of these resources at their disposal, looking to break the law in such a terrible manner over these discs that you can barely make money off of. Like, it doesn't make financial sense. He claims that what happened in the interview is that some of the information in the emails was fabricated. He also claims that some of the tests that were done in court with the activation process were done incorrectly or done fraudulently. I will let you decide whether or not you believe that. Personally speaking, the idea that the emails were edited, and the idea that the emails were edited and all of his were not accessible after the case started, that's, in my personal opinion, that sounds a little too Hillary Clinton for me. What I think happened is he just did something really dumb. He didn't realize how dumb it was until afterwards, and he screwed up terribly, and now he has to pay for it. That's what I believe was going on there. But I don't think that this was done to make a lot of money. It just doesn't add up to me in any way, shape, or form. The deals he was making do not make sense for me to do with 3 employees. It definitely doesn't make sense for somebody with a company of his size to be doing, for the amount of work that goes into it and the amount of money that comes out of it. I'd also be very appreciative if somebody provided timestamps, since I forgot to while I was doing the interview. Big thanks to Vior, Muffy, Deep Lacker, and Doc Volt in the Discord for creating the document that you see below. Most of that was Muffy's work, and also for taking part in the interview along with me. There's a document below that I suggest you look through if you want a little bit more information on the case. We went through all this information in detail over the past few days prior to doing this interview and prior to doing this video. My goal here was not to interrupt or talk over him constantly, but rather to allow him to answer all of the questions that we had in a proper manner, so that you can decide for yourself whether you agree with him and believe him, or disagree with him and think that he's full of crap. But I think that after you listen to everything that he has to say, and you combine that with Microsoft's part of the story, you can decide for yourself what you think would be appropriate. I would have personally, if I were to do something like this, had the CDs created en masse in the United States. I would have had it printed in some crappy font that made it obvious it wasn't from Microsoft, that this is some third-party reinstall disk of the original software, and distributed it like that. I think he made a very big mistake in putting those logos on there. I'm going to get on to the interview. That's my thoughts. You let me know what you think of the interview, and let me know if it changes your opinion at all. And I do have a document below that I'm going to be updating as time goes on with questions, curiosities, and also a lot of the facts that you should know if you're getting involved with the case. That's it, and thank you for watching. All right, started. All right, so today I'm going to be interviewing Eric. He is the one that was involved in the Microsoft case that I did the video about, who's going to be spending 15 months in jail for distributing Windows reinstall CDs. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Lewis. I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so just starting off with everything, there were some things that you emailed me that you said you wanted to clarify. Do you want to go over that before we even get into my set of questions?
Yeah, well, there's a ton of things that I want to clarify. Yeah, let's see here. Well, you know, we have this. Somebody wrote this like bolded list of things, and I just kind of wanted to let's go over them, just spur it here. If that's okay with you, is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. First one, Microsoft did not bring this case. That's true. The United States government brought this case. But it would never have gone where it went if not for Microsoft. And if you deducted the expert testimony and the letters from Microsoft, then this would have never ended or resulted in what it has. So, yes, it's correct. It should have been a civil case, not a criminal case, but it was brought as a criminal case, and Microsoft doesn't bring criminal cases, right? Like federal cases like this, that's obviously the United States government, but I do believe that they were just coerced and coaxed into this by Microsoft. I was there in court. I was listening to testimony, and you can go ahead and find that testimony online yourself, or I could just supply it to you in links if you want. Especially the valuation testimony, where McGloin, the Microsoft representative, says that the two softwares both are valued the same and function the same with or without a license. I believe that to be not accurate. So, and that is specifically the testimony that the judge based, his valuation on, which resulted in my prison sentence. All right, next. Lundgren established an elaborate counterfeit supply chain in China. Not true. I ran a company called Source Captain in China. And this company basically sourced all of the parts and components needed for refurbishing electronics and fixing things. not just electronics. We did wheelchairs, like wheels for wheelchairs. We did LED lights for changing out from fluorescent or incandescent. But then we also really focused on like laptop screws that were proprietary, so that people could fix laptops, and caddies, because caddies would get lost. Whenever you take out a hard drive and you shred that hard drive, the caddies would get lost, and then you couldn't reuse the laptop. So we'd specialize in caddies and generic adapters, power adapters, that sort of stuff. Anything really to keep electronics and things repaired and in use in society for utilitarian value. The next one here: Lundgren failed to stop after being warned. No, not correct. I was never warned. The first warning that I got was, from Microsoft. There was never any communication at all. To this day, there's never been any communication. I would love to have a sit down with Microsoft, but I doubt that that's going to happen. I believe that I'm hoping that we have a coalition of recyclers that would also like to have a sit down with Microsoft, including PIRG and iFixit. And this coalition of recyclers would like to talk to Microsoft about how to move recycling forward, which is what I'm all about. So I hope that happens. I hope that Microsoft will have a sit down to talk about how we can make the future more efficient and support recycling and support amazing initiatives like the right for repair, and so that we can just combat this e-waste epidemic that we face. It's the fastest growing waste stream in the world. So I wasn't warned at all. There was, I think that maybe Bob Wolf, in court, they were saying that Bob Wolf received some sort of a warning from Homeland Security that something had been, no, it was from Customs. From Customs that a package had been seized. But that was, I got told that, later on. And technically, whenever we would ship even screws to the United States, packages would get seized all the time. That was just kind of normal. Usually they'd be let back go, like it would be something that they would hold for like a month, and then they would just, let it go on its way. So I'm sure that Bob didn't think anything of it when that happened, but no, I was never warned. My warning came in the format of officers busting down my door with masks on and machine guns, and I happened to not be home. Or sorry, to be exact, semi-automatic rifles. And I happened to not be home, but I had colleagues that were staying with me, an elderly couple. They were knocked to the ground, handcuffed, and the whole 9 yards. And all my electronics were taken, and I still haven't gotten those back. But neither here nor there. No, I was not warned. Next, Lundgren pleaded guilty. This is true. I did plead guilty. After 5 years of going through this, I refused to plead guilty until the government would replace Windows operating systems to Dell Restore CDs. The very first day that this happened, I flew directly to the federal government in Florida, told them everything, said, look, I'm a recycler. My whole life's about recycling. I have no criminal history, and I made these discs to help people. There's no licenses. It's freeware online, and you need to understand this. So here's all the information. And when I did that, basically, 5 years later in court, they're still trying to say that, it's the equivalency of software with a license, and with or without a license, they function the same, and with or without a license, they're valued the same, and that Microsoft had lost. The first number was $8.37 million. That's what the federal indictments were given to me at, and then and 48 years in prison, and then that got dropped all the way down to in court, $700,000 in the valuation hearing, based off of, again, $25 valuation, which is what a brand new Microsoft operating system costs through the MRR program, which is a program that gives you a license, and you're paying for the license for a new operating system. Again, I want to make it very clear, I never dealt in licenses. I would never deal in licenses. I only dealt in the freeware, the free, you can't call it freeware, the free software that you can download online, whatever you want to call that. And the purpose was to give consumers repair tools so that they could actually fix whatever it is that they had, and they would have the ability to do so. The reason why I thought about doing this in the first place, I was spurred to do this when Bob Wolf told me that refurbishers needed these CDs, that Dell stopped providing these CDs because they were saving a nickel per computer that they were selling, and they just offer the link rather than providing the CD. This is before the partitions on the hard drives, obviously. You got to go back, this is 8 years ago. And so basically there was a demand.
So this is before they had recovery partitions on the drive that allow you to reinstall, but after they stopped providing the CDs.
Yes, exactly. So Louis, Dell basically stopped providing the CDs and switched over really quickly to, hey, we have it online, which is great, except for, I get a call from my mother saying that my grandmother, that her computer was messed up and she needed it fixed. So she went to Best Buy. Best Buy transferred her to Geek Squad. And the next thing you know, she's paying $180 to fix her old laptop. And what does she do? She decides to buy a new laptop, which happens to come with a Microsoft operating system. And there you go. So now she has this perfectly functioning laptop that, had she had a repair tool on hand, it would have been easy for her to put in, click enter, 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 and refresh or reset her computer, just like you would reset a game on your gaming console.
All right, so my first question here would be, before we get into any of the rest of it, in terms of the evidence that was submitted via the court documents, is there any of that evidence that you would say is incorrect? Obviously, besides the valuation of the CDs. So we've already established that that there's a great disagreement on the valuation of the CD as a license. But in terms of, they have emails that are going back and forth between you and other people. There are talks about what it is they confiscated or did not confiscate. In terms of the evidence that was submitted, is there any of that evidence that you would say is incorrect or fabricated?
I would say yes, a lot of it.
And if so, which?
Okay, so specifically, emails where I'm saying that the CDs are 90% accurate. These are duplicates. So it's literally a mirror image of the software. The software is identical, right? It's a mirror image, same zeros and ones. Now, what I'm referring to is the color of the actual CD, right? Which I didn't care about, because we weren't trying to, this wasn't something that I was trying to, I just needed everybody to know that it went with a Dell and that it had, the operating system on it, so that they could flip it over and say, does it match my operating system? Does it match my model? Great, this is the CD that I use. But it wasn't at any point in time meant to be, Microsoft doesn't make money off of these. They don't lose money off of these. Dell doesn't make or lose money off of these. In fact, it's the CDs themselves don't hurt anybody. Nobody's a victim. If a restore CD is used 1,000 times, nobody suffers.
Okay, now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, to answer your question.
Actually, somebody just came in there. Did somebody have a point?
Yeah, I got a question. If they didn't have their original CDs, how would they compare the color to see if that was the same model?
Oh, I was saying to you that the color is irrelevant. That the color that we had on the CD was totally off, and I didn't care. I just cared that the actual software was identical and would function and be the tool that consumers would need to be able to, restore or basically refresh their computer.
All right, so one of the first questions that I would have here is the crux of this argument is that this wasn't done to make money and it didn't hurt anybody. And I can understand where you're coming from there. You're distributing restore disks that people can just use to reinstall Windows on their machine. This is something they could freely download. The license key is already on the machine. That part I covered in the last video, and I don't think that part is in much dispute. The part that was interesting to me when I dug in further to the case, and when I was reading through, and when Muffy and Deep Black were reading through, is essentially the molds. So there were molds made so that the disk would, every single physical property of the disk would resemble the original one provided by Microsoft and Dell, down to a level that, in my opinion, is not necessary to reinstall an operating system. So if I need to reinstall the OS, so
let's talk about that. Number one, there's no molds. There's no such thing as a mold for a CD. So that's total and utter bullshit. There's no molds. There were no molds ever made, and that email is total and utter bullshit. In fact, the location in that email I've never been to before. You need to understand where these emails came from. These emails all came from Bob Wolf, which is a guy that now got 6 months for cooperating with the government. After the government imaged all my emails and all of my information, took all my hard drives, and then seemed to coincidentally lose all of it during trial. So in an unprecedented situation where the government lost all of the evidence in my case, and then got evidence from this guy who's been cooperating with them for 3 years, including a singular invoice that has the date that is 2 years off from any of this. So the invoice was obviously fake, to the point where the government just kind of, like, hid it and didn't talk about it. And then emails where I had a forensic expert in the case go through and say, these emails have been tainted. Here's how we know. And the judge just kind of, shrugged and said, well, I view a hard drive as a file cabinet, and as long as most of the files are the same.
Okay, so I don't mean to interrupt you at this point, but this is an important one. So at this point, are you claiming that some of the emails were fabricated?
Yes.
Okay, so which ones in particular are the ones that... So I was going to have a question. Can you let me allow... I want to finish this question, and then you can tell me afterwards if this was part of the emails that were fabricated. But I just want to get... I'll let you talk about that, but just to get this part out. Essentially,
sure.
the part that I think was most compelling to those who were critical of my first video was the idea that the discs themselves looked identical. It didn't say restore CD for this laptop or Dell Windows XP SP3 CD. It had the barcode and everything down to the point where it was a 99.9% replica copy, and that amount of effort would not have to go in to doing this if somebody simply wanted to reinstall the disk. That amount of effort would only have to go in if the intent was to fool someone into thinking that this literally came from Dell or Microsoft when it didn't, and that seems to be where a lot of the conflict is coming from. And so the question here is, and there was also a set of emails where you were talking back and forth with Bob about a client that did not like that this was a counterfeit, so they weren't able to accept them, and you had said this is as close as it's going to get. And it's, from my point of view, that looks like the goal was to deceive someone into thinking that this came straight from Microsoft when it didn't, which is very different from just having a CDR that has text on it saying Dell Windows XP3 restore disk. If this was something that was not done with the goal of making a profit, then what is the point of making the disk look identical to the original, to the point where it does look like you're taking credit for Dell or Microsoft's product labeling?
I'm glad you asked, and here's the answer. When I lived in China, I wanted to cover my ass on this, and I knew that if anything was different about that CD, then Microsoft could say that I hacked it, cracked it, changed it, just like they're trying to say now, which is bullshit. I didn't do anything to that disk. All we did was, when I went to a place called Huachanbei, which is Seg Market in Shenzhen, and as easy as ordering a pizza, just as we order everything else, I literally say, here's the disk, and we want this. I said the words for everybody who speaks Mandarin. I said, ge wo yanda ma, ge wo yanda, which means I want identical, this identical. And then, the Chinese are like, well, do you want us to change it in any way? And I'm like, no, I don't want you to change it in any way. I want that identical. And they're like, well, do you want us to give you COAs or licenses? And I said, no, hell no. I just want this identical thing that's given away for free, that doesn't have anything changed on it. It needs to be identical. So when I was saying that, I was referring mainly to, obviously, the software, because I didn't want Microsoft to come back and call me a hacker or something like this, right? I wanted it to be the exact same thing that you download off the internet for free, identical. And so when we did that, what they did, they just put it in a duplicating machine, duplicate out 28,000. They take the top and they scan the top, and then they just, print. There is no molds at all in a CD. They just print the top, based off of the scan of the other. And every one of the barcodes that you're saying we went through so much effort for, it's all the same barcode. It's literally just a scan. It's a copy of the front and a copy of the back. And then other than those two copies of the front and back, it's the original software.
Okay, so now the next is there is this one client. Essentially, let's say that this was being done. Let's just say that part is all true, and that you were doing that so that they wouldn't be caught coming into the country on customs. Why would the customer say, "Oh, this is not the original disc. I don't want it"? Because if all of that was done just to make customs and Microsoft not bother you, then why is it that the actual customer would say, this dot is not there, or this 0 is an O? Did they know that they were getting discs that you were printing yourself, or were these customers expecting discs that came from Microsoft and Dell? Like, how do you square that circle?
So I was told by Bob Wolf, who is basically the man who knew the refurbisher who requested this. Bob Wolf is a broker in the United States. All right, I'm a sourcing person in China, running this company called Source Captain that's at the time trying to provide all of these repair parts. He told me that his guys didn't want to take the time to burn them all themselves because obviously U.S. labor rates and the cost for CDs in the U.S. And so he said that they were well aware and that it's fine if all of them were just basically the photocopy of the front and back, right? And so that's what we did. And then they got there and he sent them off to his clients. He sent off a sample to his clients and his client says, no, we're not going to buy these. The client sent the sample back. Bob Wolf ended up sitting on all of these in his garage, and the client ended up deciding to make their own, as every client did in the United States. All the refurbishers just decided, we're going to ghost the hard drive we're going to ghost the hard drive. Then we're going to make the CD, throw it in the box for the consumer later on if they have a problem, to mitigate customer service issues. That's the entire industry. So by the time we actually got the product here, the product, basically everybody said, we already have them. We're already making our own, and yours only go to a certain model that we don't need anymore because we're getting in all these other models. And so basically they sat in Bob Wolf's garage, and then Bob Wolf's house got raided, and then he turned state's evidence, and then all of his stuff and my stuff was taken, and then basically, coincidentally, all of the evidence was lost in the case. 2 years later, Bob Wolf finds new evidence, provides new evidence to the government, and wouldn't you know, he's not going to prison now. I mean, there was no sales of any of this stuff. The $80,000 that they're referring to, that's what Bob Wolf paid Source Captain over the course of 4 years for all of the parts that he ever bought. The only sale that actually went through was for $3,400, and that was the whole sting by the United States government. My biggest buyer was the United States government for basically, 2 years later, a year
I'm
later.
sorry, but I'm a little confused. Is Bob going to jail for 6 months or 0 months?
Bob's got house arrest for 6 months, which ended 6 months ago. And
okay, so 6 months of house arrest, and he turned state's evidence to avoid jail time.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes, and so so basically, the $80,000 that was referenced in trial had nothing to do with the Restore CDs. That was all the business that was done over 4 years for all of the different broker deals that Bob Wolf did, ranging from hard drives to caddies to screws to, I think we even did some solar panels with the guy. But it had nothing to do with these CDs. In fact, the government combed through 48,000 emails of mine. There was no other illegal activity, none. There's nothing else that the government could find on me because everything that we were providing wasn't illegal. We were not in a business of, this wasn't some kingpin operation. I'm not some copyright expert. I'm a recycler that's trying to just figure out a way to keep this shit out of landfills.
All right, so one of the main points that I got there was essentially that to import, you were having them created, you have having these discs fabricated with the logos and everything on them so that they would make it their way through customs, and you were having the fabrication done in China because the labor to have everything burned in the United States was too high. So what would it have cost you to have the discs made in the United States and then just have, Courier new font say Dell, Microsoft, Windows Restore disk, not actually from Microsoft? Like, what would the cost have been on something like that?
If we made them in the United States instead?
Yeah.
I don't know because I didn't ever make them in the United States, but all of the refurbishers that did basically came to the conclusion that the cost, even though it was more convenient because then whatever laptops came in, they're refurbishing 45,000 laptops a month, right? So whatever units came in, they got to be able to match them with that specific Restore CD. So basically, my solution was too slow for them. And they all just decided to take it in-house and do it themselves, even though it was more expensive. But you know, this whole demand came from the fact that Dell and other companies stopped supplying the CDs, started putting the partitions online, and then eventually on hard drives, right, on the partition on a hard drive. And when it's free online or on your hard drive, you know, my grandmother doesn't know how to download a CD and burn it. My mother doesn't know, right? And then if it's on your hard drive, obviously that's the first part that breaks. It's the only moving part in a computer. So it's and then when your hard drive breaks, how do you actually use the CD? It's how do you actually burn a CD or download a CD with a hard drive that's broken? It's this catch-22, and I was just trying to give people the tool that usually they lose or forget or leave somewhere. I wanted to make sure that people had that tool so that they could repair their own computer like you would change oil in your car. I mean, that was the goal. And again, I didn't make money on this. Anybody who says I made money on this, no, that is not accurate. No money was made on this whole venture because A, nothing was sold, B, I had to cover logistics, and C, Bob Wolf, the only payment I ever got from him for this product was the payment from the U.S. government, so thank you, taxpayers. You know, I mean, I technically owe taxpayers $3,400.
Okay, so the only payment that you had gotten, you said, was the $3,400 from Bob?
That was the only payment for this product that I received. Yes.
Okay,
correct.
but you had because you had said that you had done so because they had listed a bunch of wire transfers that went up to $80,000, but that was for the other stuff, is what you're saying?
That was for all of the other things over the course of 4 years that I'm in China. When he's basically some for the same refurbishers, some for other broker deals that he wanted, whatever he wanted to buy. That was
okay, because that was another one of the criticisms was that you had said it was $3,800, but they posted something like $70,000 or $80,000 worth of wire transfers in PayPal, and they said no, Eric must be lying about the amounts of CDs that went through.
Not true. That was for all the other products before these CDs. Let's see. I got a couple here. We got the whole Lundgren pleaded guilty. When you get hit with 21 federal indictments, my lawyers basically said, look, it doesn't matter if you're innocent. It doesn't matter if you want to fight this. If any one of these stick for any reason at all, you have to fight and win 21 times in a row. And if you lose once, you're going to go to prison for a minimum of 7 years. And I was just like, well, and then obviously it's more expensive, and I'd already spent $800,000+ by that point in time. Now I'm into it for $860,000 plus a $50,000 fine plus 15 years in prison plus.
Yeah,
right?
From what I see as a business owner, when I saw the dollar amounts being discussed, even if you were in it to make money, my first reaction is when you have employees, when you see a large number, it gets divided. So when I saw $1,000 and I had one of them, and I was just living in my apartment, it was wow. Then when you have 5 employees, it's like, eh. And then when you have 20 or 30 employees, $1,000 just, it turns into $1 in your head because it's getting. And you had said, how many employees did you say that you had?
I mean, honestly, I am, at the time, in the United States and overseas with the recycling operation and the sourcing operation, over 40.
Okay, so when I was looking at these dollar values over this amount of years, I wasn't thinking in my head, with 40 employees, that this was necessarily to make money. But what people were saying is, you were saying that I'm selling these CDs for a quarter or 50 cents. There was no money being made. But there's this one email here where you said, we will not have to sell at $175 each because we're making the newer version. The market is still plenty high for SP3 and W7, correct? When I read that, it sounds like... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so basically that email says $1.75, right?
Yeah, because that's not a quarter. That's the main point. That was one of the criticisms in the original video. Was that
email was found on Bob Wolf's computer 2 years later, and coincidentally, he had turned state's evidence 2 years prior to that. So when you tell a man that he's never going to see his family for a very, very, very long time, you seem to get information that comes out of the woodwork that never existed.
All right. So is your claim that this email is not authentic, or that that entire thing was essentially typed up by him?
My claim is that the dollar amount's not authentic.
Okay, so we
never sold these, and we would never be able to sell them for that price. Who would pay that price when you can literally download it and burn it for maybe 50 cents or somewhere around 50 cents, right?
So is the claim that this email was yours, but they edited certain aspects of it to make you look worse after the fact?
My claim is that the government requested emails that would make me guilty, so that there was some sort of value, and the cooperating witness decided to cooperate.
Okay, so just to be clear, I'm sorry, because people that are watching this after the fact are gonna. I've gotten used to when I do edited videos, anticipating the comments and then asking the questions. The part where it says 175, that was not typed by you.
175 was not typed by me. No.
Okay, so that's the claim. All right, so that now, so that this would have. So why did you not give the original emails? Essentially, is one of the questions that I imagine would come up.
I did give the original emails. I didn't give them; they were taken. All my information was taken. All my hard drives were taken. Everything was taken, and then conveniently lost by the United States government before trial, and then refound by their new, by Bob Wolf, which was their new cooperating witness. 2 years later, after the fact.
Was Bob part of a sting operation the entire time, or this was just Bob turned against you once he was caught?
The second that Bob's house got a knock on the door by the feds, that was the day that he said, "I'll do whatever you want, just please, go easy on me." So, yeah, I mean, that's so basically, they took his information, they took all his computers too, and then they lost those as well. But then coincidentally, there was some other laptop that came from somewhere that happened to have these emails on them that I can no longer corroborate. I can't, by this point in time, you're talking about something that happened 5 years prior, where I know for a fact that nobody's going to be able to pay, nobody in their right mind would be paying $1.75 for these units, But even if somebody was dumb enough to do that, even if somebody was dumb enough to pay $1.75 for like shipping and handling, right? Number one, I didn't want to make money off of these. The whole point was to create a self-perpetual system where people could get the CDs that they need. I was already a multi-millionaire by this point in time. I'm running 2 companies, and I already have enough money. I don't need to make money.
This is the one point where when I crunched the numbers in my head, even though there are aspects of this that I didn't like, and I'll get to those later, that was the one aspect in my head where it was hard for me to agree with the cynics just as a business person that looks at numbers on a regular basis. When I look at the time period, when I look at the number of employees, when I look at the amount of work, even if money was made, that amount of money, when you divide it up amongst the amount of employees and infrastructure, it is not worth necessarily breaking the law to this extent for. That was the part that just in my head didn't add up from the critics. So I'm glad that you clarified that point.
There was, in court, I was made to be this kingpin, and this was made to be this like giant scheme. And
because when I read this and it says like 175, are we able to get more? It does sound like you. And when you combine that with the fact that the CDs themselves I have to update this from my original video because I didn't see the exact thing. This does look like a counterfeit because the label is literally copied and pasted. That part from when you add that up with those emails, it does look like you were just looking to deceive people that did not know that they were going to be receiving a counterfeit in order to make money.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? You're saying that?
Oh yeah. When I add up the fact that the CD itself has a completely counterfeited label on it, the fact that there were people who thought they were going to be getting originals that were getting counterfeits and declining them, and the fact that there were talks about selling them for $1.75 or more as opposed to a quarter, that adds up to a narrative that you were looking to, that the reason for counterfeiting the label rather than producing CDRs in America with just, handwritten Windows CD was for the purpose of misleading people to make money.
So if that's the case, then we're talking about amount of money that's so little. Why would I ever take a risk so large for an amount of money so little as a businessman? If I'm a social entrepreneur trying to create a business model, I thought that there's no risk here. When you say it's a counterfeit label specifically, you're talking about the same label on every single unit. So it's not like we went through and moved anything. It was just a photocopy of the front, a photocopy of the back, and a duplicate of the actual data. And the purpose was, if you got a CD that said Eric's Restore CD, are you going to put it in your computer? Are you going to use it? Do you even know how to use it or what it goes to? It says Dell on it, so you know it goes to a Dell computer. It says the OS on it, the model of the OS. By the way, there's no Microsoft logo. It's just the word Microsoft, whatever the OS is. Because that way you can flip over the unit, look at your COA, and say, oh, yes, this goes with my COA. This is the CD I'm supposed to use. This is the repair tool I'm supposed to use to reset or refresh my operating system.
I mean, the people that are not really going to have the knowledge on how to do that, I don't think are people that even know what a COA is, honestly. Like,
well, let's say that I wanted to, make my $1.50, $1.75. If that's your premise, then I have to state to you, at that price point, if that was the valuation that we're talking about, I wouldn't be going to prison, and this wouldn't be a felony. There's a dollar amount in which it's a felony, considered a felony, and the way that I was convicted was by convincing a grand jury that we were talking about $300 a unit and multi-millions of dollars in loss to Microsoft. And then that got brought down to $25 a unit. But there's a big spread between the 25 cents that we were trying to get to cover costs and then the $25 that the government valued these at. And the big difference is one has a license and one doesn't have a license.
I agree with you there. That the idea that they were saying that this has the same value as something with a license is tying, and that is misleading. That's something that they never addressed properly. Microsoft never addressed properly in their blog post, and that's something that I still, to this, regardless of any of the disagreements I have, I still find that to be disgusting. The fact that they were valuing it at $25. And again, as I said, as a business owner, even though I look at the emails about the trying to make the label look perfect, and I look at the emails about the price you were selling it at and selling it for more than a quarter, my personal opinion is that this was not done solely as... I can't square the circle of how anybody with 40 employees is thinking this is the way I'm going to get rich. I would imagine that you have to have that this was not done solely for the money, but the area of criticism where I can't square the circle is essentially why you said that people would not put the disc in the computer if it's an Eric's Restore CD, but could it have said something like just Dell Windows Restore CD SP3 or whatever in a different font or something like that?
Let's talk about that, Louis, because I'm glad you asked. You're absolutely correct. Looking back, when I was 20 years old and I did this, we're talking 8 years ago, right? When I actually walked in and ordered this like you'd order a pizza, and I said, "Gewo yanda jigama," what I really should have said was, don't put the logo on the CD. I am 100% guilty of trademark infringement, which is a $7,000 fine that I'm happy to pay, and that's civil court, not criminal court. And that's no felony on your record, and that's no prison time. We're talking about a civil dispute about trademark infringement, which is based off of the valuation of the product itself, not the license. And that was if I could do it over, that's what I would do. I realize now that my actions, I could have done things differently. I should have done things differently. But, my point, my purpose, it was always about trying to get these tools to the people who need them so that we can keep things out of landfills. You have to understand my mindset.
Lawyer?
16 years old. I've been recycling since I was 16 years old. This is all I do. This is what I care about. So, no, I'm not trying to make money off of this. I'm trying to make sure that people get the tools that they need so that they can repair their legally owned property.
Yeah, because when I look... Go ahead. VR wanted to chime in with something here before I...
why didn't you ask a lawyer?
I did. I asked a civil lawyer at the time, and the civil lawyer told me that... I asked two people. I asked one buddy of mine who is very, very, very technical. And my technical guy said, look, can the CD be used in any way that can harm anyone? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, what if, is there any way that it could be cracked or hacked? And he's like, well, no different than any other CD out there that is given away by or downloaded by anybody. He asked me the question, did you change anything on it? I said, no, we're just duplicating that free software. That's it. That's all we're doing. And he goes, as long as you don't change anything, you're fine. And I said, that's what the lawyer said. And then my tech guy said, look, if you don't have a license, if you don't have a key and a license, I asked him, I said, if I don't have a key and a license, what good is this CD? And he said, well, it's a shitty version of a Frisbee is what he said. He said it's basically a coffee coaster. And I was like, okay, so there's no way that this can be used in any way to hurt anybody. He goes, no, not unless you've already paid the piper. And I said, great. So everybody needs to have that handshake with Microsoft. They all need to have paid Microsoft. The box needs to have a license. Otherwise, you can't do anything with it. It needs to have that key, right, to do that handshake with Microsoft.
Right, that wasn't exactly the point of the question. I was asking why you didn't ask a lawyer about what you should have on the disc itself, like on the cover of it, like the labels and the like.
Yes, that's why I said I violated trademark infringement, because I asked the lawyer about the software itself, but we never talked about the actual front of it. And it wasn't like I went in and said, I want you to make sure that everything's correct on it. I just said, make it like that. I need this exact thing duplicated. And they didn't even do a good job at it. You're talking about scanning the top, scanning the bottom, and the only thing that they did a great job on is what the machine part does, which is the duplication process. I mean, every 0 and 1 is identical to what Microsoft has on theirs. And I can't even say on theirs because Microsoft doesn't supply Restore CDs. Microsoft does not sell Restore CDs. They allow the rights for Dell to manufacture as many Restore CDs as they want. Microsoft doesn't make a penny on those Restore CDs. And in this situation, Dell stopped providing Restore CDs because they cost Dell a nickel. And so because of that, that's why the market opened up, and that's why there was a demand for these from people that were used to getting Restore CDs and didn't have them anymore, and needed them because that's how they would fix their computer.
Can I chime in with something here for a second?
Sure.
Go for it. All right.
So you said that Dell doesn't make these CDs anymore, but there's some import records that show that you've imported CDs from Dell Incorporated. Can you explain that?
There's import records that show that I've imported CDs from Dell Incorporated?
Yes. Would you? I mean, I might be able to show them to you, I think, or...
Yeah, I'd have to see them. I don't know. You'd have to show them to me. I've done recycling for Dell. My company does recycling for Dell, or did for 3 years. We got in 114 container loads of product through the Dell E&O program in Dallas, Texas, and in California. I'm not aware of any other imports other than that. Or maybe it was like, is it like adapters or other parts and components, or what does it say on the label?
I sent you a picture. You should have it in your DMs.
I don't know how to look at this thing. I've never used this app before. Where do I see it? Can you email it to me?
1 second here. Should get did you get a little notification or something from me?
No, not yet. VC Text, is that you?
Actually, I'll just put it there, I guess. Hold on.
If you want to say an email address, I can mute that out when it comes to when I edit through all of this. I'm gonna play the full interview, but I'm gonna edit out like breaks or if you say an email address or a number or something.
Sure. That sounds great.
You should be able to see the picture in VC Text.
I see. Okay, yeah, I got one here. Hold on. It won't let me zoom. Okay, here we go. It's zooming in now.
So import number 3, 5, and 6 all came from Dell Incorporated.
Import number 3, 5, and 6. I'm looking here. Hold on. 3, 5, 6. Dell Incorporated, Dell Incorporated, Dell Incorporated. Wait. Yeah, I have no idea. In fact, I didn't even ship these myself. The factory shipped them from China over to Bob Wolf. So I didn't even take care of shipping. There was nothing. I think there was 2 boxes that were, or 3 boxes, something like that were shipped to me. And then I forwarded them to Bob Wolf from the United States. I don't know why they were shipped to me, but they're on here as well. If you go look at 48, 49, 50, and 51, those ones were shipped to him. And that was during that whole sting operation thing where he basically said, hey, do you have any boxes? And I go, yeah, I have 4 that have been sitting here for a year and a half. I'm going to throw them away. I got no use for them. And he's like, well, I want them. I'm like, okay, you can have them.
Oh, sorry.
Everything other than that, up from there, between number 47 up, I had no control over. I never shipped any of these. These are all basically, they're from the factory to Bob Wolf, or sometimes from the factory to wherever, but not from me. And honestly, I don't know what half of these are, because I didn't handle logistics. All I did was basically, Bob Wolf said, "Hey, I got him," and I said, "Great," and all I did was order him in China. So I went to Watch on Bay, Seg Market, placed the order, paid a deposit. Then when they said they were ready to ship, they called me up. I went back, I paid the rest, and that was my involvement in all this.
I'm confused. You said you didn't do logistics, but earlier you said you did do logistics in China. So, I mean, what do you mean exactly?
What I mean is, in this operation, the factory, I order them, they handle the logistics. They ship this product, they duplicate the product. They give me a sample and say, "Is this good?" And I look at it and say, "Sure." But they actually do the duplication and the logistics of the product to Bob Wolf, and then Bob Wolf was supposed to do the whole, brokering. I mean, he was the one who wanted these things in the first place, saying that there was a market and that he had a company that wanted these things because it was cheaper to do them in China than in the United States. And I looked into this, trying to make sure that it was all on the up and up, and said, "Yeah, there's no license. It's free to download." Okay, got it. Great. Is good going to come from this? Great. Can anything bad come from this? No. Great. Done.
But you never thought to ask your lawyer about the logos on the discs?
When it's freeware, and no, did I think about asking about the logos? No, I thought I was dealing in freeware. I thought I was dealing in something that wasn't valued. I didn't see how me selling this was going to hurt anybody or cost anybody anything. I saw the good in doing this, but I couldn't see any bad in doing this. And to this day, I don't believe that anybody was really hurt by my actions. I believe people could have been helped. I believe e-waste could have been kept out of landfills. I do not believe that Microsoft lost $1 that they deserved, at least. I mean, sure, they lose money if somebody keeps their computer for twice as long because they're able to fix it, right? Because they lose out on a future sale, but that has nothing to do with me.
Okay, I have one more thing. So, in one of I don't know which case this was, but they tested your CD in a laptop. It was a Lenovo X220. While they did that, there was no prompt to ever type a product key in while it was installing. And after it was finished, Windows was complaining about an invalid product key. Can you maybe explain something about that?
Sure, yeah, happily. The individual who tested it used the wrong COA. So it didn't function as intended, because it's not supposed to function unless you use the correct COA for the correct system.
But why would it have an invalid key on the first boot up when no key was ever put in to begin with, if it didn't come with a key already on the disk?
So there's different versions of this software, okay? Basically, in certain versions, it's an automated process that happens inside of the machine, between the chipset inside the machine and a handshake with Microsoft. Okay? So basically, if it said, not going to work, it's because it's not supposed to work as Microsoft intended. If it says, ding, ding, good, it works, it's because Microsoft allows it to work. They spend a lot of money to make sure that the software that they allow for every OEM to give out for free cannot be used in a malicious way. So that's why it didn't work, because it wasn't intended to work on that IBM system. And he didn't use the correct COA. He has to use the correct COA, or the chipset inside has to be correct.
So in other words, what you're saying is, like, say you handed me a Dell CD for, like, I don't know, an Optiplex 930. I would have to use that on an Optiplex 930 in order for it to successfully activate?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And you have to either put in the correct COA, the correct code, right, that's on the bottom of the unit, or there's a chipset inside that already has that code in it, and it automatically checks, in an automated fashion, it checks to make sure. But either way, there is a handshake process between Microsoft Online and your computer. Whether you're typing in that code or if the code's on the actual chipset, that process has to happen. And the reason why it didn't work on some machines is because Obviously, it wasn't supposed to work on those machines. That was actually that was the restore CD operating as intended to protect Microsoft, right? I mean, that's they create this whole thing to make sure that no way, shape, or form can it be used in a malicious way, and that was just proof that it can't be used in a malicious way.
Yeah, I mean,
you can pay for. I mean, basically, yeah, you can go download the CD for free, or get the USB version, or have the partition on your hard drive. But if you don't have a license, you know, you got to pay to play. You got to pay the piper. Today, you can download it for free online, just like you could download the Restore CDs for free. But eventually, you're paying for it. You know, I mean, that's just how it works. Like Microsoft, no matter what you do, they're going to get theirs. This is a racket. They own that racket. And I was not attempting to mess with or touch or deal with ever licenses. They sell licenses. I had nothing to do with licenses. This was only the Restore CD.
Okay, well, I think that that pretty much covers the questions I had.
Yeah, I think one of the points here, and when they were saying the $25 for the Restore CD, I'm just throwing a shot in the dark here, but when I buy any of those refurbished Lenovo's from Tiger Direct, they always say it comes with one of those refurbished CDs and it has the little license on the side and it says refurbished Windows 7 license or something. So I think what's going on here is that only companies like Tiger Direct actually pay the $25 for that license, even for a reinstall. Like 99.999% of refurbishers out there that are small just say it has a license key on the bottom. Screw it, we're reinstalling with that license key because it came with it. If I was giving this computer to my mother, I would not have to tell her to pay $25 to reinstall, so why the hell should I? And that's why they were valuing it at I think that's the only explanation in my head as to why they valued it at $25, because if you're a refurbisher, I believe that's what they're saying you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to use the license that came with it if you're a recycler.
Lewis, may I comment, bud?
Yeah, because I may be wrong there. I don't know about that. That's just my guess.
All right. So, I mean, I've had a lot of time to think about this, and the only logical reason that anybody would ever use the MRR program is if you are going to buy an upgraded OS. If you want to buy a new OS that's an upgraded OS from the original one that came with the secondhand computer, that's the only logical reason why you would ever buy this new license, because you already have the license to the old OS and it's free to download the software and load it, so you don't need a license to say Windows XP. But when Windows 7 came out and you wanted to make more money on that laptop selling it on Tiger Direct to somebody like yourself, you would go buy from the MRR program if you were in that market, which is, by the way, is a private market. It's not a public market. You have to be part of their, membership thing, and you have to sign certain documents and sign your life away. That private market, if you wanted to go buy the OS, the only logical reason why you would do that is so that you could upgrade the operating system and sell that old computer for more money because it has a new operating system to somebody like you on Tiger Direct. That is why that's why MRR exists. That's the only reason why you pay the $25. And that has nothing to do with Restore CDs. That's paying for a new upgraded license. That has nothing to do with, utilizing the original license that came with your computer. And may I state a fact, and this is a fact. The license follows the hardware in perpetuity until the hardware's demise. That's the legal terminology in which I based these Restore CDs on, which is accurate. In other words, you can take that laptop, you can reload the operating, restore use the Restore CD on it, give it to a friend. He uses it for 3 years, uses the Restore CD on it, sells it on eBay. Somebody else uses the Restore CD, gives it to Goodwill. That 100 people can use that box.
And I agree with that. I think, but what I'm saying is I think that their argument was the only thing that I can sanely imagine for the $25 valuation was that they were saying, no, when a refurbisher gets it, they can't use that license that was already on it. That's why this would have had to be $25, because they would have had to buy a license if they are a certified professional refurbisher or recycler. That's the only thing that enters my mind as to why they would even attempt to legally value that at $25. I'm not saying that is how the law works. That's just where the dots connect in my head.
The judge didn't understand the difference between They're selling a new license and a new operating system for that price, which is an upgraded operating system, and I'm dealing with providing no license, and you're utilizing your original license, and this is just the medium in which you're able to reset your computer, this restore CD.
All right, so to be clear, you're saying that with the refurbishing system, that's primarily used if I give you, I recycle my Windows XP machine, and I want to be able to, and and you're a recycler, and you want to be able to resell it with Windows 7 or Windows 8 or 10. That's when you would get into this recycling program with the $25.
Yeah, because you're going to pay me more money for it. So that's when it makes sense for me to go spend the $25 because I can up the price to $50, and I'll net another $25 by working with Microsoft to buy a new operating system with a new license for a secondhand computer. That's the only way that you'd ever buy. Otherwise, why would I ever buy what I already own and have the legal right to? Where I can down. Yeah, there's no other logical explanation for that. The problem is that in court, you had this. The judge looks over at the authority, which in this case is Microsoft. I'm this social entrepreneur in a fedora in the corner, and they use the words like China and pirating, and now I'm the devil. And then Microsoft comes in, and Microsoft says,
"I'm sorry to interrupt, but you wore the fedora in court."
Of course, I always wear the fedora.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but
no, it's fine. I hope they allow it in prison. If not, then I'm
no, but that's
the first time I've taken it off in years. So in court, basically, McGloin's testimony, he does say that the license follows the hardware in perpetuity, right? But then he says that the same zeros and ones on their software are on the restore CD. And the judge just correlates that with, oh, well, if the software is on the restore CD, then the restore CD is worth the software. And there was this big jump made where nobody objected, and I don't know why. I tried to object. Didn't work, but it basically, there was this big jump that was made that totally overlooked the fact that one has a license and one doesn't, and one you're paying for this license because it's new, and the other one you already have the rights to the license and that you own. So there's a reason why these restore CDs are free, and they were free before I ever even got involved in this. It's not like this has always been the case. Hell, the operating system's free now. You can go download it today. Go download Windows 10 today. And then use it, and eventually you're going to get these annoying messages, and you're going to have to either, if you want to be able to update it, you're going to have to be able to pay them their dues, pay the piper, or it's like test driving a car.
That is not how that works.
Okay. Go ahead and tell me how that works about operating systems today.
You go down and download it, and then it prompts you for an install key. It is only if you say, I'm going to give the key offline that it allows you into the OS. You are signing an agreement with Microsoft to give that key when you go up, when it allows you to. When you click that button. Otherwise,
so in other words, when I access the internet, that's when I have to pay the piper.
Yes, that is the agreement that you sign by doing that.
So if I'm not accessing the internet, if I'm using it to just type, documents or something, or store pictures, would I ever have to pay Microsoft for it?
Technically, no, but that is not a free OS. That is a free word processor.
Technically, it's the operating system, just not fully. You don't get all of the operating system. You get part of it, right? I mean, you need to. We're saying, I agree with what you're saying. And by the way, who is this? What's your name?
Vior.
Vior. I agree with what you're saying. You're right. We both come to the same end conclusion, which is unless you're willing to pay the piper for the license, you're not going to be able to utilize the full utilitarian functionality of the software. Correct?
However, the OS will still work.
Well,
even after you connect to the internet, the OS will still work properly.
You're saying
it will also still update.
Without, so you're saying the OS will still work and still update. You're talking about what OS, just to be specific?
Windows 10 and Windows 7.
And you're talking about...
I'm unsure about Windows 8.
You're talking about not my restore CDs, but you're talking about specifically, or not any restore. My restore CDs are the same as any restore CDs. You're talking
any
about...
restore CD will do.
Are you talking about if you download it from Windows Today, or are you talking about restore CDs?
Both.
Okay, yeah, well, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. The function, if in different versions of the operating systems, Microsoft took different approaches to make sure that eventually they were paid for their license. And some you had 30 days, and others you had 3 days. And some you weren't able to download updates, and some you couldn't connect to the internet without paying, and some, but no matter what, at the end of the day, if you were offline and you loaded the OS, it just waited for you to connect and do that handshake with Microsoft before actions were taken. Again, I never dealt in licenses. I never dealt in operating systems. I dealt in restore CDs for the sole purpose of delivering them to people who already owned a legal, valid license copy and legal computer. And if they were delivered to anybody else by accident, they could not be used at all. There was no value to these, and it didn't hurt anybody. That's the point that I'm trying to get across here.
I'm confused. So earlier, whenever we were talking about the court test of that laptop, you said that it's perfectly normal for it to say it has an invalid key because that's the security, that's it working the way it's intended. But
yes.
Just now you agreed with Vior that it's supposed to prompt you for a key whenever you install it, which is not what happened when they tested it in court.
Okay, so there's different versions that were tested. The one that failed, it failed because they didn't use the right COA and the right key. The other one that failed was because the chipset on the board wasn't the right one that matched the CD. So in both cases, the safety mechanisms that Microsoft has embedded inside of the Dell Restore CD work properly as intended on my duplicate one because it's the exact same thing.
I mean, now you're just saying that, I don't know, this is weird. Like,
if you look into the court transcripts, if you read them, you can go through each unit and see that the times in which he used the wrong CD in the wrong laptop, like a Dell CD in a Lenovo laptop, it didn't function. The times he used the wrong COA with a laptop, it didn't function.
But I can take a license key from, let's say there's a Dell Optiplex 990 that has a Windows 7 license key. I can take that license key, let's say it's for Windows 7 Home. I can then install Windows 7 Home on another computer, let's say it's a Lenovo, and I can activate it using that same key. It's not legal, but it will work.
So what you're saying is that you can break the law, and I agree. You can break the law if you want. You can also, if I sold you a stapler, you could go murder somebody with it. But am I an accomplice?
You're saying that Microsoft has systems in place to combat this, but they don't.
No, I'm saying they do have systems in place to combat this because no matter how you use this CD, there's no way that you can use the CD legally, right, as intended, that would harm anybody or steal anything from anybody. And the intent and the actual, the functionality and the intent both match what I'm telling you right now. If you wanted to, sure, you could go on the dark web and find some crack and hack it, and sure, you could do that with the one that you download for free online. You could do that with anything. But that's you breaking the law. So I don't know what we're talking about here.
If it's... Oh, sorry. You can go.
Where did you hear this information in the first place?
Which information specifically you're talking about?
In regards to the OS and the disks.
In regards to the operating system and the disks, I have 3 expert witnesses that I spoke to over the course of 2 years, and I got a lot of lessons about these disks. Glenn Weddock, Dan Haste, these guys were basically, I have full write-ups. I have screenshot, step-by-step processes. And then in court, I was in court when they gave their testimony, and I was there for 3 days prior while they were explaining all of this to the lawyers, trying to get them to understand, when my lawyers really weren't technically savvy. They were good, they were reputable lawyers, but they weren't really technically savvy. So that's where all of this information came from, was, experts like Glenn Weddock wrote Windows for Dummies, and who actually went and testified in multiple federal cases and teaches everybody at Microsoft about operating systems to this day. But yet the judge said, "Oh, I don't credit your testimony," and threw it out, and only kept the Microsoft expert witnesses' testimony, because obviously the two contradicted so severely, and the authority in the courtroom was Microsoft. So that's where I learned all of this from. Prior to this, this was just one of the hundreds of things that we sourced to try to keep laptops out of landfills and try to make sure that things could be reused and try to help repair.
And where did you get the original lawyer from that you asked about the software copying?
That lawyer was Bruce, and Bruce is now I think he actually became a judge between now and then. He's now an appellate's judge.
I mean, where did you meet him from?
He was referred to me through Lilian Sanchez, who was another lawyer on this case, and those two lawyers worked in tandem on my case to bring it through trial. And it wasn't. Where did I find the lawyers?
No, not for the trial, but when you were consulting a lawyer on the legality of copying the discs, right? Where did you find that lawyer?
You're saying, the civil lawyer, you're saying, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. The civil lawyer was a friend of the family who I called up and basically asked these questions to prior.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and it wasn't, I didn't get all of the answers that I should have gotten. Specifically, my biggest mistake was, telling them, "Gewo Yanda, give me this exact same thing so that you don't mess with it at all." And they did, but in doing so, taking and scanning the top of that disk and then putting that on the disk, I would have been much. This would not have been such an issue had I just called it, Eric's Restore CD with the same software on the disk, just called it anything else. That was my I screwed up there, but again, that's a civil issue, and it's trademark infringement, and we're talking about being slapped with a fine, not criminal indictments, 5 years, $860,000, and all this other, right?
Of course.
All right, so sorry. One of the other questions I had that I probably should have mentioned earlier is there were some mentions in the emails of these Canon PS400s. It looks like some kind of camera charger or battery charger. Was that some? Can you tell us a little bit more about what was going on there? I'm not sure what Microsoft is trying to imply with the email. My guess would be that they're trying to imply, hey, he's not just counterfeiting Windows, he's counterfeiting Canon chargers because he's a counterfeiter that wears a fedora. Is this, were those legitimate chargers? Were those knockoffs? Were those ones that look legitimate but were actually knockoffs? What was going on there with the PS400s?
Surplus product that was legitimate, that basically there was no market for. And a sample load was sent to Bob Wolf because he was a broker. He looked for a market, couldn't find one, and that was it. But there was no sales of those either, and that wasn't something that was even illegal. Nothing else was illegal, but what you have here is you have in court, they come through 48,000 emails of mine trying to paint a case that I am some sort of a criminal mastermind. And that's the best that they could come up with was, well, there's some other product that we can't validate. And it was, a couple of boxes of something that was shipped to Bob Wolf as well. So it must be counterfeit. And that's absolute bullshit. It's not counterfeit at all.
Because the main thing I got reading it was that I import a lot of stuff for my business, and they want more detailed invoices depending on how much you're importing. And the number there was something around 9 or 10,000, I believe. I think it was 10,000. So what was up with that being imported without an official invoice?
It was never imported. There was no 9 or 10,000 that were imported. There was a sample of like 2 boxes, a couple of boxes. I mean, we're talking about something from 7 years ago. I don't know if it was 2 boxes, 3 boxes, 1 box, but it was a sample that went to him that he didn't pay for, and he said, "Nope, I don't have a market for these." And I said, "Great, well then I won't buy them," and that was it. Don't you think that if there was anything else that the United States government could peg on me, considering that they were willing to take it this far, don't you think it would have come to light? Don't you think that if there was any other illegal activity that I was participating in, after combing through everything and going through this fine comb detail, don't you think that they would have a little bit more to go off of? There was nothing else. We were sourcing things that were all either, name brand product or generic product. We're not idiots, and we're not criminals.
Because there was one email where you were talking about air freighting it if there was a market, or something along the lines of air freighting it if there was a market, so that you could get it through without an official invoice.
Well, if there's an email where it seems incredibly damning, then I would like you to look at where that email came from. I'm telling you right now that the only place where emails were actually scraped from for this entire case came. I wish that I can find my original emails and be able to share those with you. What I was able to find from the emails that I was able to find, we were able to prove in court that there was manipulation, and it was pretty obvious why there was manipulation. And if you look at the only invoice, the one in question, the reason why the government pulled away from it, look at the date on the invoice, and then look at when the invoice magically, sprouted up 2 years later, right before trial, when Bob Wolf wants to make sure that he's going to give the government enough whatever to not have to go to prison. It's you have to understand what this is. When the federal government bust down your door and leave a warrant, when they federally indict you with 21 indictments, you're going to prison, period. By the time I had actually come to court, they have already spent millions of dollars in man hours for one sole purpose, which is to make sure that there's either a deal cut or there's an example made one way or the other. Either way, it's me going to prison. That's it. So obviously, the government's going to throw up everything that they can at the wall and see what sticks. And the Canon chargers didn't stick because it was just another item out of the hundreds of items that we were sourcing that was legal. The item that wasn't, the item that caused all this issue, the only item, this Restore CD, I screwed up by having the logo on it. I will regret that until the day I die. But at the same time, I'm glad that the end result of all this is that hopefully people start paying attention more to recycling and to the right to repair and to figure out how to just, deal with this waste that we're dealing with. I've been trying to deal with it, but it's honestly, it's growing rapidly every single year. We're not paying attention to it, and it's getting worse. And the more that we incentivize consumerism, and the more that OEMs are allowed to just practice planned obsolescence and not provide repair tools, the more waste I'm going to have to deal with as a recycler. And I can't. All the recyclers in our country, there's 5,000 recyclers in the country. We recycle 8% of the e-waste that we're producing. It's ridiculous.
I hear you there, and I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying in terms of this, of the mistake that you made. And the one point that I was looking to get to that you segued into before I got to, but I'm glad because I think I should get to it before an hour, is when you said that more people are going to become aware of recycling because of this case, and more people are going to become aware of what Microsoft did. To this day, to everything that you've told me, I still think that their $25 valuation of that disc was BS. I still think the way that they tied things together to make this 15-month sentence rather than much less is BS. And I can even get to the point of believing that this was a series of I asked the lawyer this, I got bad advice, I made stupid decisions. The one, and I hope more people pay attention to recycling, and I hope people pay more attention to right to repair as a result. But the one thing that gets me is when in my business, I'm just going to explain this and you tell me your thoughts, that we're constantly told that the reason that our boxes are opened at customs, the reason that Jessa Jones got a $1,700 box of iPhone screens confiscated that she's never getting back, the reason that I have to worry about my shipments is because customs needs to open it to make sure that nothing is counterfeit. And this is something that we deal with constantly, and it's constantly fucking us. I'm going to get demonetized for that, but fuck it. For anything from power buttons for phones or batteries or anything, even when those items are legitimate, even if it's a hard drive cable that we bought that was legitimate. When we import those things, we're not looking to con anybody. We're not looking to misrepresent it to a customer. I tell my customer, some factory somewhere in China made this and I bought it from them. It works. It does the job. I'm not misrepresenting this as coming from Cupertino. That it's just something that I bought. And
of course.
And now the thing is, they're always saying, well, the reason that we need to have this rule is because there's somebody out there that's counterfeiting. And when somebody is importing or trying to import massive CDs that look exactly like a Microsoft or Dell CD, that uses their logo, that uses their image, that gets it to the point where the printing of it is identical and then tries to pass it off to other people that way, it's kind of like they're saying, well, this is why you can't have nice things. And I completely support that you should not be going to jail for 15 months. I support that Microsoft pulled a lot of BS in court. And I would still maintain that a 74, 75-year-old judge presiding over a case where you're talking about licenses and activation in this, I would not want to be you, let's just say that. But at the same time, I cannot fully support this as a right to repair thing because I don't want to give the idea to people that what I'm okay with doing is actively printing logos and all rights reserved trademark on something to make it look like something it's not. If I bought something and it had an Apple logo because some factory that was pissed off at Apple decided to make it for me, I'm fine with that. If they printed it without an Apple logo, I'm fine with it, but I wouldn't try to actively change it so that I could represent it to somebody as that. Even if it was and I know it's software here, you're saying you were distributing the software bit for bit copy, but I can't get my head around supporting this as a right to repair issue because people are going to think that what I'm supporting is somebody misrepresenting something. And we're constantly fighting the perception that we're misrepresenting products to our customers. That was what happened in Norway with that guy that was sued for importing refurbished screens. Do you get where I'm coming from here?
Sort of. I mean, if you don't think that a repair CD, a restore tool, that a restore CD that is meant to repair your computer is not some tool that is needed by consumers, sure.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that is a tool that is absolutely needed by people, and I don't care if that tool is distributed. I understand that it's difficult to get it from the manufacturer. I understand that there's a good damn reason that my recovery partition don't work half the time, and that a multi-billion-dollar company doesn't put money into engineering or coding that better, and I damn well know why they don't include that disk with the computer. I'm not stupid. But yes. I am saying that tool should be distributed, but if it was distributed not looking like it came from Microsoft. The issue here is that it looked like it came from Microsoft or Dell, and that other people were not aware that this was not coming from Microsoft or Dell. And if this was supported as a right to repair issue, it looks like we're trying to pass something off as something it isn't. I could not give a shit less if you distributed this CD, regardless of the legality of it from my personal ethics, if it said on it in Courier new font, Microsoft Windows CD for this Dell computer, and didn't try to make it look like it came from Dell or Microsoft. Does that make sense?
Understood. So if the barcode on every unit's identical, and if the front of the unit, instead of being the green color, it's like a lime color or a yellow color, if the unit is obviously not coming from the proper channels, but the actual data, the zeros and ones on the unit, are the exact mirror image tool that the consumer needs, that right there, my purpose was, if refurbishers get these, and I don't think we're getting this. We were giving these to refurbishers. Refurbishers were not actually using these. They were going to throw them in the box so that if the consumer had a problem, they could use them down the road a year from now. to fix their problem, and they wouldn't be calling with customer service complaints, right? So the refurbisher is ghosting. I mean, that's how refurbishers are loading 25,000 units a month.
Yeah, I'm aware that no refurbisher is putting CDs in there. That's insane.
Great.
They're using ISO images or something.
I mean, you understand that. I don't know if everybody else listening to this understands that. So I'm kind of speaking to them.
Yeah, the value of the CD is that you can offer it with a computer. You know, it's like offering it with the original box of the charger. It's like a cherry on top that makes somebody more likely to buy it. Hey, it comes with the restore disc. But some people are going to say the reason that these were made counterfeited with the labels and everything was so that if I'm trying to sell a computer to somebody and I say, here's a CDR with the original software, I look a little shadier than I would if I was selling it to somebody with, hey, look, this has the Apple logo on the disc and it looks like it came straight from Apple. It's easier for me to sell that than it is for me to have to explain, oh, it's the original software, it just comes on something that looks like a CDR, don't worry about that. I would need to have a salesperson for that, or a good sales pitch, or a charming personality, and that makes it more difficult. So people are going to argue that it's that this misrepresentation that this came directly from Microsoft or Dell was to increase the value of what was being sold. And that's where the issue is, not necessarily with the fact that you're offering a CD with the operating system that only works with the license key attached to the computer.
So, 1, none of these were sold. 2, they didn't get to consumers. 3,
they didn't get to consumers because they were confiscated.
Actually, 1 box was confiscated, or 2 boxes or 3 boxes, but 20, 30, 40 boxes, whatever equates to the 28,000. I don't know because I didn't ship them, but whatever equates to the 28,000 got to Bob Wolf, and they sat in his garage for months and months, because there was no market. His buyer didn't buy these because he said, I want them to look better than this. And I was like, screw that. And he's like, well, I'm going to make them. I'm making them now. I don't need you anymore. And every refurbisher didn't need these from China because they all just made their own. Hundreds of thousands of these are being made all around, by the actual refurbishers direct. And if you Google Restore CD, you will see every single one of them puts the logo. I'm just saying to you, the logo's not on there because they're trying to trick anybody. The logo's on there because they're trying to help people realize, oh, this is a Windows operating system. This goes to a Dell computer, and then here's the model on it. So now I know how to use this tool correctly by what's printed on the top of it. That's my mistake, is that I should have used the word Dell and Windows and put typewriter style instructions on the top of this unit. I didn't do that. But that doesn't justify prison, and that doesn't justify all the hell that I've gone through for the last 5 years.
I can agree that I don't think that justifies prison. I would say some sort of fine.
That's civil issue, not criminal.
I can, because my argument was I don't think that this is worth prison. I can see if they said, hey, you used our logo and this shit and you're not supposed to, and you distributed this and we don't really want you to do that, and you used our logo, here's a $50,000 fine since you're or whatever fine of your percentage of your income since you're a millionaire. Don't do this shit. But the prison part seemed to be done out of some sort of spite. But now, one of the other things here is there a way that you can disprove the key activation exhibit personally? Because if you can, that would put a serious would put a serious anvil around the ankle of Microsoft's case.
Yes, I can disprove the CD activation. You're saying yes.
Yeah, if you can prove. In addition,
Dan Hayes already did. You're talking about on the IBM 220.
Yeah, if you could prove that the key activation exhibit, if you can disprove that, and you can combine that with proving that this evidence was fabricated, proving that emails were changed, this would be a mistrial entirely.
So the proving that the emails were changed was already brought up in court, and the judge basically said, well, since the majority of emails we believe are the same based off of printed versions that the prosecution has given and the new evidence that the prosecution has provided, since they're similar, we're going to accept them. So that was the judge's decision. I can't negate that. Just like it was the judge's decision to say that the valuation of $25 equating to $700,000 equating to me going to prison. I can't negate that. There's no, that the judge has the right to make those sort of calls in court. that being said, it's very easy to disprove the IBM X220. The fact that loads with the CD. You're saying that. I mean, that Dan Hast already did that. He wrote a whole report on it.
Is that the expert that wound up getting thrown out because they didn't particularly agree with him?
No, that's a forensic expert. One of the 3 forensics experts that was there. There was also 2 Fortune 500 companies that came. I had an invoice. Oh, by the way, just for everybody to understand this, I purchased in invoice 40,000 units of these Restore CDs directly from the largest computer company in the world, and I paid 4.8 cents a piece. I repeat, I paid less than a nickel a piece for these when I bought them with full right to resell directly from the largest computer company in the world. I still have them. If you look online and you see the pictures of me sitting like laying down with white CDs all around me, those aren't the CDs of mine. Those are the CDs that I purchased, 40,000 units, directly from the largest computer company in the world with full right to resell. And that's the only example ever out there of Restore CDs being sold wholesale. So when you want to talk about what are these worth in the market, I gave a real example of a Restore CD. The government used an example of a license.
All right.
A license format of an operating system. I just want to be very clear that, I purchased 40,000 of these for less than a nickel a piece, and I offered to sell them to the government. They wouldn't pay me, 10 cents. I was hoping I could double my money.
Yeah.
It's a joke, but you know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous, the valuation. Had the valuation been accurate, this would not have been a felony. This would never have gone to criminal. This would never have gone to federal court. I would never have been indicted. And I would never have lost, $860,000 in 15 months of my life. So it's a really important point that I'm making here when it comes to the valuation and the functionality of a Restore CD.
I don't have anything else to add at that point. I've been trying to think up just about every question that I'm going to get or what I would have missed when I see the comments of this video. I would open the floor to anybody else here if they have any questions. And just thank you for taking the time to talk, clear all this up, and answer all these, I can imagine, annoying questions since you've been asked these questions millions of times already. Does anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah, I got one question. So you said that there was something that happened with all your emails. Can you say exactly what went down with that? Why did you lose them?
So I lost my computers.
The Hillary question.
I lost all of my emails because they were all sent to different accounts. The accounts that they were sent to were accounts that I had in China. Old emails. 5 years later, I didn't have access to the account. I connected it to another email, so when I click, forgot password, it changed, and so that's why I do the 2 emails that I have now.
So on in a lot of these emails here, the emails from you, it says they're coming from sourcecaptain.com. That's your own website, is it not?
No, not anymore. That was closed when I left China, and then a year and a half later was when my house was raided in the United States.
So you're saying that maybe some of these emails between then and now are just totally fabricated then?
No, I'm saying all of the emails were actually original and were pure, and then the government lost all of that, and then miraculously re-ghosted or whatever a laptop that Bob Wolf found, other than all of the data that the government lost and all the hard drives that the government lost. And that was 2 years after Bob Wolf had already turned state's evidence and become an agent of the United States.
So just out of curiosity, this mail, did you set up your own mail server for your business, or?
Can you say that again? I got a call. I missed that. You say it, bud?
Sorry. Yeah. This mail's did you set up your own mail server, or was it something where you paid for email service and you got your own little domain name for it? What exactly?
Yeah, it was like a GoDaddy setup, Sorry.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, somebody keeps calling through. It was a GoDaddy setup thing. It was like one of those, and when you stop paying for it, then you lose access to the email. And I didn't need the email anymore because I wasn't doing Source Captain anymore. When I came back to the United States, I started the hybrid recycling company, and that took off, and that took up all my time, doing hybrid recycling for the next 6 years before all this madness started.
Okay, I was just wondering, because like if you had your own server, you might be able to like go and retrieve the ones that you may have lost or that got altered somehow, like from the back end of it.
You better believe that I tried. And what we ended up having to do was go email by email by email with the emails that the government gave us, and then the printouts that the government had prior, and tried to compare the two, and hoped to believe that the government was not, being dishonest about the printouts, which they gave us at the same time of giving us this new imaged copy. It would have been just as easy to just print out the printouts at the same time. But what we were able to find from the government's evidence and the government's evidence, which came 2 years after the fact, was still errors. The biggest error that is just blindingly obvious is the date on the invoice that. Sorry, guys, are you there? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah, we can hear you. It just dropped out for a quarter of a second, but you're fine.
The biggest blinding, obviously, piece of this is the date of the invoice. That was provided 2 years after the fact, after the government lost all the evidence in the case. And I couldn't, I didn't have anything to come back at them with other than the fact of checking, their printouts individually, which was stacked like, a foot thick, along with or actually probably, it's just a big stack of paper. I don't know. Along with the new imaged data that they took 2 years later from their expert witness, who was basically trying to stay out of prison and obviously successfully did. So, I'm not saying I'm innocent entirely here, guys. If I could go back and do something differently, man, I wish I would have not said, Gewa Yanda, don't give me this exact same thing. I would have said, call it, Eric's Restore CD, call it anything else.
Excuse me, but can you recap how you lost 100% access to your emails?
Source Captain was the name of the company. I went ahead and got a whole package on GoDaddy for Source Captain. And when I came back to America, I didn't pay for that package anymore. So basically, I had no access to be able to go get that information from that Source Captain domain that was
This
set
sounds
up,
a little Hillary-ish
back
to me.
then, and used to be, that's where all of this went to. It was all
We're getting into Hillary
related.
territory.
I was able to check some emails that went to other people, and then check those emails against the information that the government provided me 2 years later, and a month before trial, or not even a month before trial. But that's not. It wasn't. It's like there's 48,000 emails in which the government combed through to find these emails that I can't check, and then they can't give me my hard drives to check them or any of my systems to check them because they lost them all. They lost the evidence in the case, and then they went back to the guy who has sole motive to be able to, provide whatever is necessary to keep his ass out of prison, and that person happens to find new evidence that sprouts out of the woodwork, and I just find that very interesting.
Did you ever contact GoDaddy if they could restore the service, or if you could retrieve your emails from them?
We contacted, and the answer was it's been too long and you can't. So we did. We tried to contact. This is 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We tried to contact them. I was able to find some of the emails to be able to look through. We were able to prove that the dates did not match on the emails that they were providing us. We were able to prove that words did not match on the emails. And basically, the end result was the judge said, well, most things match. But as we all know, the best lie is one that's 99% true. So all they have to change is one word here and there, and I can look like I have an ulterior motive. I would think that they would change it to look worse, though. But, for whatever reason, if anybody here thinks that I, for tens of thousands of dollars, that I would that I would participate in something that I thought was illegal. At this point in time in my life, I am already a millionaire running a global entity that's sourcing all of these other products that are very successful and very profitable. Then they don't know who I am and they don't understand what I'm about.
Of course, the small manipulations can make you look horrible, even when larger ones would just look bullshit. Are you aware of mistrial laws? Have your lawyers informed you of such?
The first lawyer that was... Yes, I've been informed about mistrial laws to an extent. I was very ignorant going into this when it came to how the legal process works. You hire good lawyers and they fight for you, and I didn't realize that you have to educate them on what they're fighting for, and I just it was a learning process, a learning curve for me, which took up the majority of the last 5 years of my life. No, I'm not aware of everything. I'm only aware of what lawyers tell me. I have switched my lawyers 4 times. My first lawyer, when I went to go visit the federal government and came back to see him, it turned out that he was diagnosed with what's it called, where you forget everything, where you can't remember anything?
Amnesia?
Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so the first lawyer was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and stopped his practice. The second, and he was a referral from a colleague.
This is a rather
no, I was just
a tangent.
Sorry, yeah.
This is a bit of a tangent that you're on right now.
Sorry, I haven't slept in 2 days. Sorry, I apologize.
I can tell.
What is your question?
Mistrial laws. Do you know what a mistrial is?
Yes, I know what a mistrial is. I don't know why I would qualify for a mistrial, and lawyers that I'm dealing with seem to think that there is no opportunity for a mistrial here. I've brought it to the 11th
evidence
Circuit.
was
The 11th
faked.
Circuit has denied. So now the only place that it can go really is the Supreme Court, which they take less than 1 out of 500 cases. And it costs $250,000 to take it to the Supreme Court. And then it costs another $200,000 if they accept it at the Supreme Court. And by the way, since it's, the chances of them accepting this are slim to none.
If the government fakes evidence, that would be grounds for a mistrial. You do not have to go to an appeals court to have a mistrial declared.
I'm glad you asked that. We had a separate trial for my trial, specifically on the government's evidence, of which the judge ruled that the emails were close enough to similar to the point where he was going to admit them into evidence. There was a separate, whole trial on just the fact that the government lost all the evidence prior to my trial. And the judge said, well, the government was able to re-get this evidence from Bob Wolf again 2 years later from a different hard drive, so I'm going to let it go. And even though we proved that there were differences, the judge made his call on that already, so it's kind of, that already happened. I don't know if that would affect my ability for a mistrial. And then after that, after this trial with these 2 lawyers, I went and received other counsel while going after the 11th Circuit for appeals, and I was granted my emergency appeal. And then obviously after that, the 11th Circuit decided to basically keep the original federal judge's decision.
And you said you can prove the Microsoft activation scene was faked, correct?
Say again. I said I can prove that the Microsoft what was fake?
Activation scene.
I can prove that either A, the chipsets are the same, or B, it's fake. One of the two. So
then
either
you would have grounds for a mistrial under that.
I wasn't aware of that. I'll look into it. Yeah, if that's the case, then I'll look into it. I was not aware. And how would I go about? I guess I can just ask my lawyers, but I have not been told that from my legal representatives. I was told in my current situation, basically, since the judge has ruled, that it's the day that that judge ruled in that court, and we weren't able to give oral argument thereon. I was told by my lawyers that nothing else matters. That basically, we can only appeal to the 11th Circuit based on what was said in that trial. So all of the things that were not said in that trial, because nobody in that courtroom understood tech, we can't add later. There's no room for. There was no oral argument. There was no ability to argue anything other than what was said in that trial on that day. With the
lawyers sound like idiots.
They sound like idiots, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, well, then I've been paying $860,000 for a bunch of idiots. But, I don't know. At least they fought for me. I'm just happy that they were able to take it to the 11th Circuit. And, they can only talk about what was talked about in that trial. So all of the real arguments could not be discussed because we were never given the opportunity from the 11th Circuit to be able to have an oral argument or to be able to bring up new evidence. It wasn't allowed. So if I can go back and if I can prove that one fact with the X220 unit, the fact that either A, the chipset's the same, which Lewis, you could help me out with that, or I could get any of my people that I know to help me out with that, or B, that the Microsoft expert or forensics expert that looked at that was not correct, which should be pretty easy because Microsoft makes software on purpose so that it works in their favor. They're not idiots. They don't allow freeware that is going to be able to be misused. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into this freeware, this restore CD, to make sure that it is locked tight and solid.
You would be surprised.
Well, okay, if the freeware, if my version's not like locked tight and solid, then their version would not be locked tight and solid. I just find it hard to believe that millions of these things are floating around at all times during this period of time, and Microsoft would, if they could be used in a malicious way, Microsoft would find out quickly and be able to plug those holes, because you're talking about, it's not just me, it's everybody in the entire country that gets a restore CD at this time with their computer. So 48 million computers are sold, so there's that many disks floating around, So I would think that if there was malicious activity, that Microsoft would plug the holes, and that it's the exact same CD that I'm talking about, the one that it's an exact duplicate. So if mine, they made a comment. They said, "Oh, well, the CD that he has must have malware on it and be prone to viruses and be risky to use." No, it's the exact mirror image zeros and ones binary code that they are providing, and they're not even providing it, that Dell's providing on their behalf, right?
That would be them alleging that it could have that there is possibility that it could have that, and thus it is a risk because you used the exact replica of the image on top of the disk.
So I have a question about that then. How can they make those allegations? How can they honestly make those allegations when in court the forensics expert of mine and the forensics expert of theirs both agreed after testing the CD that it was a mirror image duplicate? There was no cracking or hacking.
I think what they're doing is they're not even saying that you did crack or hack it. They're saying that by virtue of using their logo, we need to make the worst possible assumption that there is a chance that you could have done that, and that is why using their logo is wrong, because even though you didn't do it in this case, if you get away with it, somebody else will feel emboldened to try it, and then if somebody else tries it, then we have software out there with a keylogger on it that has the Dell logo, that has the Microsoft logo, and looks the same as the original. And that goes back.
True. None of what you just said is actually true. That's
for you.
Not what happened here. Based on their expert witnesses' testimony, The Microsoft employee's testimony, their expert witness said this is the same CD. It's identical.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. In your case, it was. Their idea is, since you use their logo, the reason they need to prosecute so hard is because somebody else may say, okay, he only got a slap in the wrist for using the logo. Maybe then somebody else will decide it's worth the risk to sell to give away the CDs with that original label on it with keyloggers on it. I'm not saying that you did that, but I'm saying I think that's their justification for why they're shooting for the 15 months in prison over you giving, you selling this or trying to sell the CD or offering to sell the CD with their exact logo on it. Because essentially, if you could do it and get a slap in the wrist, then somebody else may try it, but with actual malware on it.
Well, for the record, from day one, when ICE sent units over to Microsoft, and Microsoft reviewed these units with forensics experts, 6 years ago, they were aware. I mean, they were aware exactly what this is. They were holding it in their hands. They knew 6 years ago that it was a duplicate. And they still then decided to proceed with these criminal indictments and push this all the way through. If you look at the letters that they wrote, if you look at their expert witnesses that flew in from Ireland and sat there and what they told the judge in the transcripts, you can see their intent. It's very obvious through their actions. And when you go back 6 years, you can see that they were holding in their hand. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. This wasn't the unknown. This was them day one having this and going, oh, duplicate CD. It's a duplicate CD. It has our software.
That we've gone over. So
okay.
I think at this point we have. I think at this point there's no more questions. I think we've answered just about every criticism that's come through in the comment section, all the questions I've had, and I can't imagine that there is any question that hasn't been answered. And I will be posting this in its entirety, so anybody that, and I'm going to ask that somebody provide timestamps so that if anybody has a specific question, they can go to it here. And thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope that giving you a platform to discuss this clears things up for all of the people who've had these questions, criticisms, or confusion about the case after reading Dell's blog and hearing my original video.
Well, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Thank you for having me. I'm exhausted. 2 days no sleep. I'm going to go sleep. Thank you guys very much.
Good luck with sleep.
All right, see ya.
You want to be removed from the channel?
Yeah, I just deafened and muted him. So I suppose a little commentary amongst ourselves before I, edit this into a coherent video. All I want to edit out is when either, there was a drop or something like that. But what do you all think so far? I personally think that this is, this seems like a case of stupidity more so than genuinely trying to get one over on people. At the same time, that whole thing with the emails, that's a little too Hillary-ish to me. I don't know. That seems very Hillary-ish to me, the part where they said they edited my email, they took out the 175, they edited what I wrote for the price and put 175 in there so it would seem like I was selling it for more.
Yeah, that sounds weird.
Extremely.
Yeah, because the thing is, I'm going to include this in my other video. I do know people in federal cases that have had this type of fraud occur, who claim that this occurred, where I believe them. But at the same time, that's somebody that I knew very, very well. This is somebody I don't know at all, so I don't really know. That all just sounds a little too Hillary-ish to me.
The main issue that I see from the software side of things is the whole the OEM CDs will only work with that company's systems. The software does not work like that unless there's specific hardware. And these laptops are too cheap to have that hardware.
Yeah, something about that didn't sound right. Like, I can take a Dell CD and put it in any computer and try to install it.
Yeah, it's just a straight ripped disk image from a stock standard factory system, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, like it'll come loaded. Like, if you put a Dell CD in a Lenovo laptop and install it, like it'll preload it with all the Dell bloatware bullshit and all that. And you, as long as the edition is the same, this is the important part. The Windows edition needs to be the same in order for the key, whatever key you use, to work.
Yeah. And Faye brings up a good point that there was a lot of. Faye brings up a good point in the chat that there was a lot of changing the subject that's fairly suspicious.
The other thing is when he said, I wanted to make it look as close as possible to the original so that I could import it.
Yeah, that sounded a little fucked up too.
I mean, like, I could have made it in America, but then people wouldn't know to use it, or people wouldn't feel as comfortable using it with their computer. If you're selling the disc with that specific computer, as he said, you would know that that disc is for your computer because you trust the vendor you purchased it from would not provide you with a disc that is not for your computer. Like, my customers trust me to the point where if, and I don't do this, but if I provided them a CDR that said Memorex with my Sharpie on it saying reload disk, that they would believe that this is how they reload the operating system on their computer. I think typing out that logo in Courier font would have sufficed. I don't think you need that logo to match it with their certificate of authority. And if the argument is that, well, the customers don't know any of this, well, how many people know what a certificate of authority is, really? Like, or how to... Like, the average person does not know what the hell that thing, what a COA or certificate of authority is, or even to match it with the disk.
Or even if it was just like a standard label, like just a white sticker label, that would still give it some form of authenticity to the person using it.
Like, they don't, the end user does not, as I said, the end user does not need to see the exact Dell logo, Windows logo in color to know that they're going to use it. If they bought a refurbished computer, my expectation is I'm getting refurbished shit. It's going to look a little different. The CD that I get with it may have Courier font on it. That's the cost of me buying used instead of new. And the only thing that I really have an issue here is with him putting that logo on the discs and then selling them, because that really does make it hard to believe the profit motive. At the same time, with what he's saying, if you have 20 or 40 or 80 employees, even if you have 10, the amount of money that would have been made from these deals is too negligible for me to believe that this was some guy rubbing his hands together saying, I'm going to make this much. When I read these emails, it sounds like he wants to make money, but the numbers in my head don't add up, because there are people that will say, you're trying to screw or scam people out of this here and there, and the reason that I laugh when people will say things like that is, do you realize how, and I know this is going to sound like some egomaniacal shit, but do you realize how little that amount of money is when you have to divide it by the amount of employees that you have at your company? It's hard for me to believe that this was his path to becoming a millionaire, or that the
the numbers don't quite add up. It almost feels like a setup by that other guy. What was his name? Like Bob?
Bob? Yeah, the guy that got that got caught that wound up being a part of this thing.
Yeah, it feels like a setup by him, because he was the one sourcing it. And Bob Wolf was the name there.
Yeah.
According to Doc Wolf.
All right, so I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that took their time out of their day to spend an hour and a half talking to this guy. I'm going to get to editing some video and posting this, and I'll talk to you all later.
Have fun.
Yeah.
All right. This was fun.